Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have encounters with the Pell Crawlers. And we are going to have some fun looking at these terrifying, freaky accounts. We'll start off with this one. Tall, white, lanky humanoid manifests at Holland, Michigan Lake. It's a spooky story and downright terrifying. So, let's look once again at these terrifying creatures known as Pell Crawlers, folks, and hear exactly what the witness, saw and basically had to live through and with to this very day, folks. Let's start. I looked up and saw an abnormally tall, white, lanky figure that seemed to have a pointy head with only eyes staring at me. I thought I was just hallucinating. And that was another brief blurb from the story, folks, setting the mood for it and telling you that the witness at first didn't believe what he was seeing. Either way, let's read the full account now and hear exactly what was so abnormal about this creature, folks. My two buddies and I, let's just call them AJ and PJ, decided to go late night fishing, have some food, and just enjoy ourselves. We drove up to Holland, Michigan, late at night at around 3 to 4 a.m. We got into the place around 5:30 a.m., and we all got set up under the bridge. Everything was going all normal until we moved spots to the boat launch. We were just casting out, just catching some smallies and seaweed. PJ was caught on something big, or so we thought. It was until he pulled it out. The thing PJ pulled out looked like an old dirty hospital gown. We all got confused and weirded out, so we decided to cut it off the hook instead of touching it. The first thing I noticed was that it started to drift toward the land instead of sinking, but I just shrugged it off. He probably shouldn't have, folks, because that sounds actually pretty damn weird. I mean, it was under the water. You'd think it'd just sink again, but no. But then again, we are talking about a piece of fabric here, so maybe it was just buoyant enough to float. But still, I can understand why it would give him such a weird vibe. It was, after all, a discarded hospital gown in the lake, so yeah, I can understand why it would basically freak anyone out who found it. Either way, let's continue with the story, folks. Everything seemed normal until I turned around to put a bait on my hook. I looked up and saw an abnormally tall, white, lanky figure that seemed to have a pony head with only eyes staring at me. I thought I was just hallucinating because it was early in the morning and I felt tired. I looked back to make sure, and the next thing I saw was him standing. The next thing I felt was chills down my spine because I looked below it and saw that the gown was cut off right below it. I tried to ignore it because I thought it was just a resident about to tell us off, but the next thing I hear is PJ telling us, "Don't freak out, but I think someone is watching us." At that point, I knew what he was talking about. We all started packing up quickly and got out of there. On the drive home, PJ explained to us what he saw. What he explained was the same thing I saw, but it was him walking towards us. I tried to do some research when I got home, but I just ended up in a dead end with only one noose from a man drowning at the boat launch in 2016. The place where we were is called Petey's Bayou Boat Launch, and that night was probably the scariest night I've ever experienced. So, it sounds like, as I said, folks, this night probably changed this guy and probably gave him nightmares for the rest of his life. But then again, I'm just saying that, folks. Let's finish off this article and then we can talk about it for a moment. If you can figure out what we saw, it would be highly appreciated. C. Okay, what did C see? Was it actually a Pell Crawler or some sort of ghost, folks? The fact that this dirty gown from a hospital keeps turning up in the story makes me think that maybe that this is some sort of apparition, perhaps, but I can't be for sure. Maybe, wherever that gown came from was cursed, and this left that curse on the gown as well, and whoever found or touched the gown, or even basically saw it, might have been cursed as well, perhaps. It's something we've read about with other ghost stories, so maybe there's something to it. Either way, there's also a note, folks, so let's read that as well. It was probably an apparition of the drowning victim, though that's just a guess. It could have been a crawler as well. Indeed, folks, it looks more like a Pell Crawler rather than a ghost, but then again, I've seen a few ghost stories in which the entities were indeed very terrifying, so maybe it could have been either. Either way, certainly a very scary story, folks. But let's go and look at the next one. Pale gray crawler humanoid encountered near Lake Mont, Georgia, and read another account with one of these pale crawler entities. And then we'll talk about, what we read the day after this, next story, folks. So let's get into this story and read through another pale crawler account that terrified the witness. A 13-year-old boy is at a rifle range cleaning up expanded shells. He hears a noise coming from a tree trunk and encounters a pale grayish humanoid. Ooh. As I said, folks, very terrifying. So, let's get into the full story now. This happened in the summer of 2003. I was 13 during one of my stays at the YMCA camp in North Georgia near Lakemont. One evening, I was tasked with having to clean up the rifle range away from the camp because the counselors did not do it due to a thunderstorm. I was walking up to the range and heard a rustling, but did not pay it any attention or any mind because we were in the Blue Ridge Mountains, foothills of the Appalachians. I walked into the newly built range platform and onto the range to pick up what brass I could find. Well, he should have basically paid that sound a bit of mind, don't you think, folks? Because maybe he would have seen this thing far sooner. Then again, for all we know, folks, him seeing it sooner might have basically set it off, and he could have very well ended up, well, being killed by this thing he was about to actually see. So, let's get back to the account and hear, well, exactly what he saw. After a few minutes, I kept hearing a rustling near a tree trunk, shrugged it off, and kept picking up the brass and putting it into a container near the firing line. I kept hearing walking, but this sounded different, like a person who was walking, not like a deer or a normal forest critter. I also heard some odd chatting and assumed it was a fellow camper. I walked to the trail towards the field and realized it was coming from the tree trunk. I walked towards the tree trunk and saw what looked like a pale gray human-like being rifling through the tree trunks and mumbling, which sounded raspy and had an odd cadence to it. I slowly walked towards it and accidentally kicked a pine cone that went through the undergrowth and made a good bit of sound. The being turned and looked at me. It had dark, sunken black eyes and thin lips, a normal-looking human nose, and patches of hair, but what caught me was that it looked shocked that I was there. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity. It walked back bipedally around 10 steps, all while maintaining eye contact with me, and got on all fours and ran into the forest. Ooh. So this corroborates other stories, folks, of people seeing these pale crawlers and them basically either walking or running on two legs or basically getting down on all fours and running like this. And this time, this figure, even though it was as terrifying as anything I've ever heard about, folks, it seems to have basically been wary of this human. Probably if it did hurt him, it would have probably become the target of, humans trying to basically find whoever killed him. They would have thought he was some sort of person because most likely, as the boy said, folks, it looked human and had human features. So it probably had very human-like hands and feet is what I'm saying, folks. The people, the police, and the authorities would have basically been looking for this entity. But then again, if they did catch it, they probably would have realized that it wasn't human. So I'm thinking that is why this entity did not hurt this boy. Either way, let's finish off this article. I, being 13, was scared to death and ran back to my cabin and told my counselors. We all walked towards the range and looked around. We did find bare feet prints and candy wrappers all over, but they chalked it up to my imagination G, as usual, folks. They found footprints. Did those footprints look like, ordinary human prints? I mean, how big are basically the footprints of a pale crawler and stuff like that? Do they look human? But are they, say, maybe over large, like, say, basically so large that no ordinary person could have made them? But even if they basically did have those features and stuff like that, the camp counselors would have just said it was probably just, either an animal or a person. Even if they did believe it was something else, maybe fearing it was some guy on the property. They would have just said to the kid, no, it's just an ordinary bear or some ordinary, animal. Because they don't want to frighten people, folks. This is one of the main jobs of the camp counselors. They keep these kids safe and basically not scared. So even if they basically did think it was some guy, they would have just said to the guy, don't worry, it's just nothing. But sadly, that's how it goes, folks. Either way, both accounts are very strange and have some very odd stories involving the pale crawlers. Either way, we're at the end, folks. So please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics, They're Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that will give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.